All right, folks, welcome back to the podcast One Man and One Tree in a Hill. My name is Jared Waters, and I would like to present to you part two of our conversation with Miss B. Ladies and gentlemen, last time we left off, she was telling us what's it like dating inside her community and what's it like coming up in the community, how she grew up. And now we're going to give you part two of the Miss B story. All right, folks, stay tuned.
Health history, mental history, family history. Do they pray? What's their family's socioeconomic status? What's their religious status? Do they want kids? What kind of schools do they want to go to? And even during the dating process, it's things as trivial as like, so what role do you want to play? Am I working and supporting while you're staying at home with the kids? How many kids do you want to have? Do you want to have a TV in the house? Like, I feel like all of the issues that crop up in marriage, a lot of them are addressed in this shidduch process of dating, which kind of makes the transition easier.
Well, what's your deal breaker? What's the deal breaker that you wouldn't have? Would you date outside of your race, or what's your ideal man for your mom? What's your mom's ideal man? What's your ideal man?
My parents would love for me to marry a rabbi.
Does it matter what color the rabbi is, or it doesn't matter? Just whatever the rabbi is.
Unfortunately, it does. I hate verbalizing this, but there is a very big stigma with marrying outside of the community. So, like, a Sephardic person is really expected to marry a Sephardic person.
You can't marry Ashkenazi.
I've had Ashkenaz people say to me, "We won't date you because you're Sephardic."
Really?
Yeah, I've had people say that to me. I'm certain that, you know, even in the Sephardic community, like, Syrians will tend to only marry Syrians. They won't want to marry Moroccans because they view us as inferior. I've also had so many stereotypes about being Moroccan. I've had people tell me, like, I've gone on dates where the guys were like, "So you're Moroccan? Oh, so I got to be careful because you have a temper." Or, "Oh, so you're Moroccan, so does your dad beat you?" Like, these are things that people have said to me outright. And I just laugh about it. I'm like, "Oh, yeah, last week he broke my arm. The week before it was my leg."
They are great dancers. I was in Marrakesh, and I danced my anus off. They are the good dancers.
Like, what can you do? You can either laugh about it and joke about it, or you can cry and tear your hair out.
But what about as like a Ethiopian? Is that like out of your question? Your dad would like? How would your dad view if you dated Ethiopian? Would he be upset if it was an Ethiopian rabbi?
I think my dad would be a lot more open-minded. I think my parents would struggle a bit in the beginning, but they would become a little more open-minded because I'm 28, and that's considered like super scandalous. It's like, oh my god, she's approaching spinsterhood. Like, marry someone anyway.
Be some pretty babies.
I think, honestly, to answer your question, I think the biggest no-no, like the biggest sin, would be marrying someone who's not Jewish. If you had to like list the sins in order of how egregious they are, the worst thing you could do to an Orthodox or Hasidic parent is marry someone who's not Jewish. And then it would turn into marry someone who's not religious. No,
would you be disassociated if you married someone outside of your religion?
Would I be what?
Will you be disassociated, or would you just be frowned upon if you married, say, someone that was Hindi?
So yeah, again, it depends really on a family-by-family basis. I have a friend who's Orthodox, and she was dating someone who is Italian Catholic. So her parents' reaction was to sit Shiva, which is the Hebrew commandment for mourning. Basically, when someone dies in the religious community, there's like laws and structure in place. You sit Shiva for 7 days, you tear your clothes, you sit on the floor, and you mourn their loss. And you have people that knew the person come and visit you and comfort you and talk about like what a great person they were. And there are prayers that are said. You're not supposed to shower or wash your body with hot water for a few days. You're not supposed to listen to music for a few days. You're not supposed to do pleasurable things. It's a period of mourning. So this girl who was dating this Italian Catholic guy, her parents literally sat Shiva for her. Like, they tore their clothes as if she had passed on, and they mourned her as if she had passed on. And they wouldn't speak to her.
For how long?
And then she broke up with him, and she came back, and they, like, welcomed her back. But then on the other hand, I know another girl who's Hasidish, and she actually met someone who was Pakistani.
Oh.
Not Jewish, Pakistani. And her dad was like, "I am not supporting this. I am not paying for a wedding. I am not giving you any money, but you are still my daughter. And so we will like leave Brooklyn and like take a train to Manhattan to meet her and her like boyfriend in a bar in like the West Village somewhere where nobody from their community will know them or see them. And they'll hug her and kiss her and say that she loves her, and then go home to synagogue and pray that like the boyfriend disappears. But they're not cutting her off. They tell the other kids in the family, the younger kids, like, she's not doing a mitzvah, like she's not with someone who's Jewish, and hopefully God, Hashem, will like help her, and we have to pray for her that she heals and that she comes back to her senses. But yeah, there's like wide extremes of reactions. You could have one family like sit and mourn as if you died. You could have one family say, we love you, we don't condone this, it really hurts us, we're going to pray that he like moves to Africa or whatever, but we'll visit you in some like hole in the wall bar where no one will see us. I don't personally know anyone who's dating out of the tribe that their parents welcome that person in their home and say, come for a Shabbat meal, but I'm certain that they exist. Again, it's such a like depends on the family, depends on the case by case basis. My parents personally, I don't know how they'd react. They would not be happy. They would cry. They would be in a lot of pain.
But you're the favorite.
But God is more. Like, have you ever seen Fiddler on the Roof?
I have. He's a nice person.
He is. Tovia, one of the most powerful scenes is how Tovia at the end has to decide between his faith to his God and his love for his daughter, who marries a Russian, like a non-Jew, a Gentile. And her daughter is madly in love with him, and he's a good man. He's a kind man. He's gracious. I forgot his name. The blonde guy, the Russian dude that she basically falls in love with and marries, right? So there's a very powerful scene at the end where she comes up to him. As the family, the Jewish family was exiled, they were forced to leave Russia, right?
Right.
So Tovia is standing there with his whole family and his little wheelbarrow of belongings, and he's forced to leave his country because of the non-Jews. And he was abused his entire life by the non-Jews. And his daughter is standing right behind him with a non-Jew saying, Papa, Papa, I love you. And he turns around and he says, no, I cannot accept this, right? And then she backs up and the screen zooms in on his face and he says, I cannot abandon my daughter whom I love so much and I gave my life and sweat to. But if I embrace her husband, I am abandoning the God that I gave my life to. My whole life, I followed his path. So it's a really, really tough conflict. It's like, do you turn your back on that which you know your entire life, the God, the laws, the songs, the prayers, the traditions for 50, 60 years by accepting this person who also really represents the world that hates you, right? That exiles you, that persecutes you. Do you embrace that? Or do you say, she'll come to her senses, she'll leave him, she doesn't know what she's doing, he hates her anyway, he's anti-Semitic probably at the bottom of his heart. Like, what do you do in such an instance? I can understand parents who face this conflict. It's a really painful one. I personally, if my child were to fall in love with someone who's not Jewish, I know for a fact I would welcome them into my home. I would not, but it's not a religious thing. It's because I want my child to feel like mommy loves me. I could commit a really bad crime, mommy loves me.
Do you feel loved by your parents?
I do, but I also feel like I have to hide parts of myself from them. And look, like many of us do that. Many of us hide parts of ourselves from our parents.
Right. My mother doesn't know who I totally am either.
Yeah. Like, I want my child to feel like I can be gay and mommy loves me. I can be a thief, mommy loves me. Like, I want my child to feel like I will love them completely and irrevocably no matter what they do or who they are. And additionally, honestly, I've taught for 10 years. I've had so many experiences with parents. I've seen parents turn away their kids, and guess what? Those kids don't come back. They find love elsewhere. It's like, if you're not going to love me, you're not going to welcome me, no problem. There's other people that will. And if I am telling my child, your loved one is not welcome in my house, there's no guarantee they'll come back, right? So I want them to feel like I can bring my loved one into my home and show them love and hopefully maybe bring them closer to Judaism.
Are you the only one that feels that way, or do your other siblings feel that way?
I don't think my siblings feel this way because I think my siblings follow a very traditional, like, ascribed.
So you're the only outcast in the family.
Like, I honestly, some of my siblings, if they're hearing me having this conversation, I could hear them say, like, oh my gosh, Sarah, you would let a non-Jew, like, marry your kid? Like, what? Like, it would be a reaction of shock more so. It would be one of, like, I can't believe my sister is talking this way, which is why I really hope that none of my siblings ever hear this podcast.
I think that it's a I think about how many people growing up just like you, probably felt just like you, and probably feel these things, but probably don't know it's okay to say this. Like
Right.
people just
Well,
think like Jewish people are one way, but it's like this big sea of people from different
it
pyramids, different
is.
forms of the pyramids, different languages, different everything else, and your story is completely different because we say let's just backtrack. We got a person who's grown up, as like a second parent. Let's say you grew up with like weights on you a little bit, weights that you didn't
Yeah.
necessarily have to put on you, but you put it on because you didn't want someone else to hold these weights, you know.
Yeah.
So that's tough. That makes you strong. Of course, you're gonna be strong because you're carrying weight that you're not supposed to carry. But your brothers and sisters and parents probably don't even know this about you. When they probably listen to this, they'll probably like, "Wow, how strong is my sister? How strong is
Or
this
like,
person in my
holy
house?"
shit, my sister is such a heretic.
No, you gotta think about sometimes when you don't understand, when you don't know a person, once you like that's why we start from the beginning. We start from the beginning, we go to the middle, we go like gradually how we get inside a person's
Yeah.
life, how that person is. So
Yeah.
would you say you don't believe in unequally yokedness? That's what the Bible says,
In what?
unequally yoked. You ever heard of that,
What does
unequally
that mean?
yoked? It's like when people are from two different cultures and they blend two different religions and blend them together. I dated this Muslim one time, this Muslim girl when I was
Mm.
in the Netherlands, and it was cool, beautiful. She was from Morocco as well.
Wow.
Trust me, I took her to prom. Everyone, she was way older than me too. I think I was like 16 and she was like 22. But I was like, don't worry, nobody can tell. And
Oh gosh.
yeah, I think I told her I was like everybody goes to prom. It's an American thing. So she went. Maybe she was 21. I don't know. I know she was older than me. But we enjoyed ourselves. We had a good time. The only problem was like when we talked about kids, she's like, I want my kids to be Muslim, and I was like, no, I don't. Like if we
That's
had
funny.
never had kids, sometimes you think, but at the same time, I'm just like, I don't know if I could do unequally yokeness because when it goes to kids, and I was like 10 years
Yeah.
ago, so of course, but when you talk
I
about kids, it's hard raising kids as two religions.
I've
It's,
had many opportunities, if you would. Like I've had interesting conversations and opportunities to have relationships with males who were not necessarily Jewish. Um, there was one person in particular, a very kind, intelligent person who I genuinely liked, but I always stopped myself from letting that relationship grow because I know deep down that I want a Jewish home. I want Shabbat
right.
meals. I want the beauty of the holidays of Purim and Hanukkah and Pesach. Like there's a world of rich tradition and beautiful tradition, and I want that for myself and my children. And I'm hoping that my husband does too. Um, but if my child were to come home with someone who's, Catholic or Muslim and say, I really love this person, I wouldn't I wouldn't be happy, but I wouldn't write them off. My instinct would not be gone.
Right.
You're not a member of the tribe. How dare you? My instinct would be, okay, what is it about this person that makes you love them?
Mm.
Why do you love them? Show me who that person is. And I would trust my child that my child would hopefully be raised well enough to only be drawn to someone who's a good essence, like a humane, kind, compassionate person. And I think that at the end of the day, what makes me different than a lot of my community is that a lot of people will put God first and then humanity second. I don't know how I developed this philosophy, but I believe that God created humans, and so humans all have a piece of God. This is a Jewish belief. We have a neshama. God took a piece of him and breathed it into us, and that is our soul.
We're all gods.
We're all God, essentially. So why would you look at a person and the first thing you look at is how many of God's laws do you keep instead of how godly of a person are you? So
Mm.
I tend to first look at a person, how godly are you? What are your good traits, your attributes? How have you bettered the world? How have you bettered yourself? Then I look at, okay, what does your skirt cover your knees? Do you eat pork? Do you it just seems lesser important than what kind of person are you? And I find that unfortunately many people who are religious, and this extends itself to Muslim, Catholic, Hindu even, they tend to look at first like, oh, so do you keep the Sabbath? Do you pray in mosque? Do you cover your hair with a hijab or with a skull cap? Like they don't look at, oh, so do you give charity? Are you judgmental? Are you kind? Are you abusive? Like what kind of person are you? So I would really, really like for my children to have a Jewish home too. I would like for them to keep the traditions alive. But if, one of them were to come home with someone who's not necessarily religious or observant or Jewish, I wouldn't immediately kick them out and say, be gone. I would say, okay, what makes this person so lovable to you? And then I would maybe try to show that person the beauty of Judaism. Come to a Shabbat meal. Come see how beautiful Shabbat dinner is. How do you feel about Shabbat? How do you feel about Judaism?
Yeah, I say you're not open till you try it. I've been to a mosque before. I've been when I was in Egypt, and I love it. The mosques are nice. I've been to a mosque. I've been to Shabbat. I've said I've embraced anything when I do have kids, that I'm just want to be in, to feel like you could talk to me about anything. I don't want to be judgmental and just be like, look, man, I don't want to be your bro, but I want to be your dad. You're not going to call me by my first name, but I want to be the point where you could talk to me and your mom about anything. And we should be able to talk about it.
It's interesting that you mentioned, I got what you mean about the yoke of togetherness. I just looked it up. There's a famous couple in Israel. You know the show Fauda?
No, I don't. Okay,
so it's a famous show about the Palestinian-Israeli conflict. It talks about how this secret undercover group of Israeli soldiers will sometimes penetrate areas like Gaza or the West Bank, and they'll go in undercover dressed as Muslim Palestinians, and they'll try to, take out terrorists or prevent terrorist attacks from happening. But what makes the show so interesting is that it also shows the perspective of the terrorists and how they sometimes suffer at the hands of the Israeli military. And it's like they try to portray an accurate, balanced tale of the conflicts both sides face. So anyway, there's a famous actor on this show, and his name is, I think, Tzachi Halevi, and he's basically Jewish. This Israeli man, Jewish his whole life, and he married a Muslim Palestinian woman.
Oh, wow. Is this show on Hulu?
Yeah, you can find it on Netflix for free. So there's an actor, his name is Tzachi Halevi, and this is like a religious, he kept Shabbat, he kept kosher man who was an actor, and he acted on this show Fauda. His role was a soldier in the IDF who would go undercover into Gaza to take out terrorists. And he met this Arab woman. Her name is Lucy Aharish. She's an Arab Israeli news anchor, a television reporter who's very famous. And she's the first Muslim Arab news presenter on mainstream Hebrew language Israeli television. So she was the first woman who would start saying, Tayyib and like hello. She would greet her audience members in Arabic and Hebrew. And so she met with Tzachi Halevi. They met and they fell deeply in love. And they got married. And this was so controversial. Oh my God, like all of Israeli media, television, everybody was getting involved and commenting on their wedding. Even the ministers of Knesset. Like, where in the world do you have a marriage where like the politicians will get involved and comment on the marriage? So you have Knesset members that are standing up in Knesset and talking about the wedding and the marriage. And there are people that are fiercely opposed. How could this religious Jew marry this Palestinian? You have like both Jews and Palestinians that are just appalled and angry and furious. And then you have people that are in full support. And you have people that are like, you know what? They really love each other. And they're learning about each other's cultures. And they both speak Arabic and they both speak Hebrew. And I just remember my dad was commenting and he was like, I don't know how they're doing this. Like, how are they raising their kids? Are they going to go to mosque? Are they going to go to synagogue? Like, they're basically raising their kids with two levels of hate, because these kids are going to have a lot of Palestinians hating them and a lot of Jews hating them. And so, like, I remember just thinking to myself, you know what? They're such a cute couple. They really love each other. Like, the way they talk about each other in the one interview that they granted the public, good for them. For fighting this and for making it work, and however they decide to raise their kids, that's for them to figure out. That's for them to figure out. And I have faith in them that they're going to raise their kids with enough love and enough knowledge to combat it.
Sometimes it's when an outside party looks in and makes you think about stuff. Like, I remember being in the Netherlands, being like an American, and then when the Iraq War was huge, like, I never saw the Iraqi side until this Canadian teacher came up and gave me a tape, and it was a documentary about all the Iraqis when it happened. And they're just like, why are y'all here? Like, look, it's another day. We have nothing. And just like getting that perspective, like being neutral, sometimes you wear this armor of where you're from. And with this armor, you you're not acceptable, you're not cognizant of like rejecting someone's ideology, views, or everything else. So like I have tons of Palestinian friends, and I love hearing their side of the fence, and I love hearing the Israeli side of the fence. And when I went to Bethlehem, like some of the Israelis couldn't go with me. I went by myself and getting their perspective and everything else. And I was like, I don't know how to, I don't know how to solve it. You got to leave it up to God. God can solve it. I don't know what to say, you know. But I know that, right? I know that people. It's hard to just do. I just don't want people to die. I just want people to live in harmony. You know, I want both sides to live in harmony. But both sides are just like, we don't know how that can happen.
Yeah.
But I'm like,
There's
when it
too
does
much-
happen, they said the world would end. So
There's too much, I feel like, misconception and miseducation, misinformation, and it leads to animosity and hate. There are people that were raised to legitimately hate Jews. And honestly, I've seen
and
this
there's
even
people
in
raised to
civil society.
legitimately hate people from Palestine as well.
Right, and there are people that were legitimately raised to hate Arabs, and
Yes.
it's sad because get to know them, get to know these people. Like I was raised my whole life, it's like there's us and like don't talk to like people from outside. They don't like Jews, and they're gonna think the worst of you. And honestly, you don't break out of that until you. Well, for me at least, like I went to Brooklyn College, and that was the first time that I was sitting in a classroom with males, the first time I was sitting in a classroom with non-Jews, the first time I was sitting in a classroom with people who were Muslim, first time I was sitting in a classroom with people who were gay or part of the LGBTQ community. And it was so surreal and weird and odd. And I'm just sitting there and I'm like, how do I act? How do these people think of me? What do they think of me? What do I think of them? And it was interesting because it was a class called Culture and Diversity, part of the requirements for a master's in education. And the professor stands up and says, okay, so we're each doing projects. Who wants to do a project that talks about, Hispanic kids in the community? Who wants to do a project talking about LGBTQ? And then she said, who wants to do the project, the PowerPoint presentation on Islamophobia? And all of a sudden I hear a voice going, me. And then a second later, I'm like, that was my voice. What? Before I even consciously reconciled that I was interested in taking an uncomfortable step and learning about another perspective, my voice just popped out. Like, I want to do it. I want to give the presentation on Islamophobia. And I'm an Orthodox Jew from an Orthodox community that loves Israel. I have family that serves in the IDF that were in terrorist attacks, that were shot at, stabbed by Muslims. And I want to do the presentation on Islamophobia because I know that I'm going to end up teaching Muslim students. I know that I know nothing about Muslims except for that which I've been exposed to, which is Muslims bad, Muslims terror, Muslims 9/11, Muslims bombings and stabbings in Israel. I don't know anyone who's not portrayed as a fanatic or a terrorist, and I don't like that. And so I ended up doing it. I ended up reaching out to a bunch of people in my class that did wear hijabs and that were Muslim, and I asked them questions that were like, what's your favorite Muslim food? Like, what's your favorite, like, traditional Mideastern food? What's your favorite Muslim prayer? What's the origin of your name? And I learned so much from them. And they started asking me questions about Judaism, and it was fascinating. It was like, I did not know this about you. Hey, we both love hummus. Hey, we both hate people that turn hummus into, like, chocolate flavored hummus. Like, why are you destroying a dish?
Like
Don't do that.
Distant cousins. You guys are like cousins.
Hey, we both have parents that are just obsessing over our meeting someone in synagogue and mosque and marrying them. We both are considered, like, spinsters because we're 26 and not married yet.
Yeah.
We both have to cover our hair and don't want, like, I mean, well, one of them wanted to. I didn't want to. But it's all about, like, reaching beyond and meeting people that are not from your community and getting to know them. And I'm going to make this political for a second. I just feel like everything that's going on right now with the Black Lives Matter movement and with just everything in general, the political climate, people are so scared. I am seeing Orthodox Jewish people that are terrified to reach out and talk to people from the Black community. And equally so, I'm seeing people from the Black community that are like, I don't, like, what am I supposed to talk about with Jewish people? Like, what am I, they're all, like, they control the rent. And I'm like, like, maybe 5 landlords that were not good people that were Jewish. So based on that, every single Jewish person now is, like, is a thieving, nasty person. I mean, I've had
Go ahead. I would
But
interject and say that it's more, if you're talking about today's climate, I think today is more, especially in New York. New York is
yeah,
really segregated city. You know,
very
down people think
segregated, and
about the South and think about how racist the South is, just like because everyone in the South lives amongst each other. So if you
right,
have a problem, someone's going to talk to somebody like that. Like when I, like when I'm talking to Jewish people, and I'm like, "You guys are the chosen people." Like, why do you say that? I was like, "That's what I was raised. You guys are the chosen people. What? That's what's in my Bible." But like being around New York, it's just like, all right, Jewish people over here, and they kind of divide to the point where
yeah,
people can't cross connect, you know. And I think that
yeah,
especially shoot, like all my good friends are all Muslims. All of them are like the best people in the world I've met are Muslims. And when you think about it, like that show Rami is like really good because it made you understand like Saudi Arabia and like Egypt of how like they import strawberries to America.
yeah.
I had no idea about that the whole time. It's crazy. He's like Osama bin Laden is like eating strawberries. I'm like, why is Osama bin Laden eating strawberries? And it's like it's very awkward, strange about like that. But I remember being young and just the images of just like terrorism. Like, why do they always have to come from Yemen? Why do they have to come from these Middle
Right,
Eastern countries? Why can't
right,
they come from our own country? You know, so
right.
it's just like I think
And
New
there's
Yorkers are
plenty of
just kind of
terrorism in our own
ignorant.
country.
Yeah, like I think New Yorkers are just kind of just ignorant to
And
like
it's so
culture.
ironic because we're considered like the melting pot. We're considered the center of diversity. I had an idea. I wanted to host a Shabbat meal and I wanted to invite people from the African American community. I want to show you guys what is Shabbat. And I got like I found no one who was interested. And I was telling a friend of mine in Israel about this, and she's like, Ma, I don't understand. New York, everybody
Lamelo.
wants to learn about everybody. And I'm like, no, 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 nobody wants to learn about nobody. Everybody's stuck in their own, like their own neighborhood, their own community. It's like, I don't know. I wish people would just try to
Sometimes I
get to
think
know
it
each
might be the older generation. Like a person at my school, she is Jewish, and she's like maybe 60, 60 something. And the whole time she kept saying, I don't understand why Black Lives Matter. I don't understand. I grew up rough. I did everything else. And I was explaining to her, I was saying that, I said, I understand what you're trying to say. I said, but what we're trying to say is, she goes, I'm Jewish. We were persecuted against. We did this. We did this. There's a whole group of people. And I was like, you got to understand, there were black people who were soldiers who went to Germany to fight off to
right, the
fight for you. And
Nazis.
then when they got back home, they couldn't get houses, they couldn't get clothes, they didn't get proper
Right.
treatment. And she kind of like understood a little bit. And I was like, you got to think about it. I was like, there's a group of people. I was like,
Yeah.
even in Israel, you could be treated bad as a Yemenite person, but when you come to America, you are not black, so you're good.
That's such a beautiful response.
If
I
you're
love that
not
you said
black,
that to
yeah,
her.
if you're not black, people don't care. It's like the whole thing is to, if you think about every subgroup of people, it's just like we are not black. Whatever we are, we're not black.
Right.
I'm this, but not black. So it's like in every
Right.
country, it's just like the lowest people are like the darkest people. So I was
And
like,
it sucks.
it
It's so
sucks. I mean, it
stupid.
sucks. I gotta ask God what's up with that, man. Like, what is going on with that? But at the same time, I had to talk to myself about numbness. Like we had to like,
Do you find that you have to become numb? Like you make yourself. We were talking earlier about how sometimes like a person like myself will try to not acknowledge my own pain because I'm trying to just move on and help other people with theirs. Do you find that you ever have to make yourself numb to the pain?
I think it's growing. I say it's numbness because it's been going on so long that you should not be numb to what's going on. Like I remember walking home in North Carolina, having kids like have a guy like pull a gun out of his car and just wave it at me, and like
What?
yeah, I was just walking home. He stops his car on the drop top. He pulls out this gun, and just
That's horrible.
and then he puts it away, and he sees me like freak out a little bit. But I
Oh
know
my
like
god.
on certain situations like I should not freak out. I should just walk like it's not happening. So I just walked off, and they drove off. But it's just like growing up in the South. It's just like my father told me he would always like be super strict, and like when he yelled at me, even when I didn't do anything wrong, he's like always say yes sir. Whenever you're wrong, say yes sir. Don't argue. Don't do anything else. And I never understood. And he's just like when a police officer comes and he asks you that question, you better not give him a different response and everything else. I can say there's
Wow.
probably been 5 times where I've talked myself out of a ticket because they were shocked how respectful I was. Like they came
Wow.
up, holster already, and as soon as they got to the car, I had my license, I had everything in the dashboard, my hands on the clock, hats off, and he looks in the car, goes, "Is everything all right?" I was like, "Yeah, my dash, everything's on the dashboard. If you need anything," and he's like, "What, what, what?" And I was like, "Yeah, whatever you
Wow.
need." And I'm like talking. I was stopped in New York. And he goes, really? And I was like, yeah, I got Florida tags. I'm not even from here. I'm just actually visiting. I don't even know. I don't know what I did. And he's like, just take a warning. Just you know what? That's a warning. This is very refreshing to do that.
Wow.
But like down south, we know you can be killed by a cop. There's plenty of times where like 8 o'clock in the morning, I'm driving a van, and I literally got back from Cuba the next day. 17 cop cars pull me over. They say there's a broken tail light, and I don't. It's my dad's van. I don't know whose van it is. And they pull me over, and the same thing, hat off, everything else, and the cop just comes up. They have their hands on their holster and stuff, and they're wondering like, well, oh, we just need to run your license real fast. And they realize nothing's on my license, everything else. And they send this black cop, and he's all like, we just want you to talk about this murder that happened in downtown Tampa last night. And he goes,
Oh my
this,
God.
and I had to tell him, I was like, this is going to sound crazy, and this is going to sound really wild, but I was in Havana, Cuba last night.
Oh my God.
And the look in his eyes just looked at me, and we kind of stared at each other, and I was like, I got pictures on my phone. I could tell you, I was literally in Cuba last night. So they go back and talk to the guy. And they're talking, and like, this kid was in Cuba last night. Like, literally was in Cuba. But I was like, sometimes I thank God that I'm in this situation and not my dad or anybody else. Imagine a dude who wasn't as calm and wasn't as like that. Like, I've
God
seen
forbid,
it. Right. There's plenty of times I've seen New York cops just do disrespectful stuff. On a train, this lady, I moved out the way so she can get on, and she's like, go ahead. I was like, no, it's okay. She goes, go ahead. I said, go ahead. And she's like, holds her gun and like walks up close to me. Then I walk like I'm get on the train and I let it go off. And I was like, I'm not going to get on the train with you. I don't think about how many police officers had a bad day and they're on the job right now. Like, I've seen it all the time. I had a college roommate who I know is probably a racist. I know as soon as he got drunk, he dropped the N-word. And he's a police officer patrolling the streets.
Oh, you had to live with him?
Yeah, but my thing was at the time, I was like, I know I have to show him that all black people are not bad. So sometimes I find myself saying, like, I need to show this guy that because most are just culture differences. I used to walk around with this big duffel black bag because I didn't like going. I just go to the gym. He goes, do you have drugs in your bag? I was like, dude, these are groceries in here. It's like, why do you put groceries in the bag? I was like, so I don't have to take 2 trips to my car. Oh, that's a smart move. But he didn't know. He didn't know.
No.
Like, someone came to my house and like poured tobacco in the trash can. He like flipped out. Get this weed out of my house. I was like, first of all, that's tobacco. Second of all, you had parties at my house where people were smoking weed. I never said anything. And it was just that fact, like, as soon as he got drunk, it was just like, he was like, why don't you play with the nigger dog? And I'm like, what the freak did you say to me?
Excuse me?
Yeah, this is North Carolina. So it's just like me, like, letting them know, like, hey, I don't, but it was the fact that I had another white roommate who was an ally, who would just be all like, sometimes in my room, they didn't know I was there. He'd be all like, I don't think Jared would like if you talked like that. He goes, well, Jared's not here. He goes, still, that's not appropriate. So sometimes it's like, you have to be the change for people to do that. Because I think all of the protests are happening is because kids grew up with people from different races. And they're just like, this is wrong. One of my friends, Zubi, she's from Bangladesh. And she's doing more for like black lives and than I can. I was like, I can't be out on all these marches all the time. But it's just all these people growing up. There's like kids growing up who realize like my kindergarten teacher's black and he was nice. Like, you could stop it at, like, the bottom level. I had a kid one time when I was teaching in Florida. She goes, all black people are just bad people. And I was like, why do you think...
How old is she?
She's 5. And I was asking her, I was like, why do you think that? She goes, that's what my dad says, like, all black people are bad. And I was like, well, what do you tell your dad? She goes, I tell him, well, Mr. Waters is nice. He's black and he's nice. And he goes, I was like, what does your dad say? He goes, well, he's different. And she goes, I told him it's not nice to say all black people are bad.
I love how a 5-year-old is schooling a parent.
But that's what's happening now. It's the kids that grew up with black.
Now. It's so sad.
It's the kids. It's the young generation. Because older people like us are like numb. Like, I would say the older generation are numb. George Floyd happened. It's like, yeah, I've seen this before. The only difference is that someone saw it on tape and you hear them cry out. There's another girl being kissed. Plenty of people killed. And sometimes you wonder about like, why you wonder why sometimes. Like, I had to tell a coworker, she was just like, Jared, you're crazy. I was like, you don't think black people have to assimilate to cultures to be nice and to laugh and to joke, to disarm that you might be scared of me? I was like, because if y'all saw me in the street, you wouldn't know this bearded dude. You wouldn't know what to think of me. And she's like, oh wow, I didn't think about it like that. I was like, yeah, think about all the people you work with. No one's like this. They're probably just caricatures of themselves because they can't be who they really are. So I wonder, sometimes it guts like that, but sometimes like when you're a comedian, it's like people just want to be happy. They don't want to talk about like what's really going on.
Yeah.
Like they don't want to hear
And
that.
sometimes you get a lot of pushback and you risk your career, you risk your salary when you do find a way to insert comedy. And honestly, I feel like comedy is the best way to deliver critique because it's a way that gets people to laugh at themselves. If you make a joke about someone being a racist, they can laugh and at the same time acknowledge like, oh, but he's right, it's wrong. If you yell at someone, you racist, you go burn your house on fire, right? They're never going to talk to you again, and they'll just feel angry and they'll feel justified in their racism. That's why I feel like comedy is such a powerful tool for helping social change. But you do risk a lot of flack.
You risk a lot of flack, and it's a lot of like when I moved to New York, it's like a lot of comedians are like white people, white people, white people, or just like saying like white privilege, everything else. I was like, well, good luck going down south where there's proud white people. Do you think they're gonna sit there and listen to this the whole time? And say what you want about like Donald Trump or whatever, but like his supporters are out there, and there's supporters who don't say anything that are like quiet, that probably don't have the same ideologies and views, but they're just Republicans.
Yeah.
And they need to be treated like people. Just because someone thinks different of you politically doesn't mean that they're the worst scum of the earth. So it's just like it's to the point now in society where it's like if you're not this, you're this. If you're not this, you're this. I was like, what happened to the people who are just neutral?
This is something I agree with. I posted a tribute to David Dorn. He was a black cop who was
I was
pretty
killed
much
in St. Louis.
Yeah, he was killed. He was standing in front of a pawn
His
shop
shop.
protecting it. It was a black business that he was protecting, and a looter came up and shot him, and then it was live streamed on Facebook. And I just felt horrible because the poor man, think about it, he was 77, he was a father, he was a grandfather. He was literally retired. He just stepped in to help protect that shop, and boom, bullet to the brain, and he's dead. And I felt awful, and I posted a tribute saying, I think this man died a hero. He deserves to be acknowledged for spending his whole life helping his community, helping better the world. And the person that shot him got caught, and I hope that, like the person who killed him learns a lesson and the justice is served. And all of a sudden, I get about 20, 30 messages. How dare you? Cops are like, all cops are bad. All cops deserve to die. And like, why are you only commenting on this person and not on this person? And you're fake and you're racist. And why are you commenting on this if you're not from this community? And blah, blah, blah. I was like, guys, relax.
Sometimes,
I posted a tribute to a person who died because I thought that he died a hero and he's a good person and his memory should be preserved in some way. It doesn't mean that I'm like for this candidate against this candidate, for this community against this community. It just means that I respect a man who was killed.
It's just a lot of information. It's a lot of information. It's just a lot of information. And sometimes when you're silent on a certain issue and you're not silent on the other issue, people just gravitate to think where you are. I was like, back in the day, voting used to be very private. Like, no one knew where you voted. No one knew what side you were on. And that my boy's from St. Louis. All those guys from St. Louis. And he told me, like, it was sad. Like, a guy was a member in the community, and the community feels for him and everything else. But, like, when people try to do this thing where they're just like, there's a meme where, like, these are protesters. These are looters. These are I was like, you telling me Martin Luther King didn't want to have tennis shoes on? You know what I mean? Like, you don't think he wanted to... You don't think he was trying to run away when those dogs got sicked on him and stuff like that? But it's just... Things are going to get crazy, And a lot of people who are rioting aren't even from the protesters. It's just random people who just wanted to break in the Gucci store.
Yeah. There's a lot of Antifa out there also. There's a lot of, like, bored teenagers that want to have extra pairs of Nikes. There's a lot of
revolt.
White people also that are breaking down into stores and looting. But
it's
no one's
everybody, yeah.
Everybody's out there. If it's free, doesn't matter what color your skin is. There's going to be people that want free stuff.
It's a distraction. It's really what is it, distracting away from everything else. I was at a protest, and this person fell out. No one knew where the person was from. No signs, anything else. Just collapsed, right?
Wait.
So this guy's having a speech, and then it's just like someone realized, like, oh, you're here to distract people. So I think that people are distracting. Should the police... the police do have a track record of, like, hurting people, but at the same time, there are good police officers out there, but it's just like, when one spoils the whole bunch, you can go to different cities, and every city is like, no, we got the same problem here,
Yeah, that's true.
And you got to think about it, it's just like a pandemic's happening, so people have a chance to actually focus.
That's true.
People haven't been
That's
outside.
right.
People are literally seeing one thing, like, wow, this guy's killed for 8 minutes. Wow, this girl was shot in her own house. This
In her
other
own
in her
house.
own house. Like, how
That
does
was
that
like
happen? And
infuriating.
you told her mother, does she have any enemies?
Ugh.
That's what you interviewed her mother and asked your enemies. So
And she was a paramedic. She was a hero. She spent her life helping people, which really bothered me too. I, uh,
just imagine
it's
if George
frustrating.
Floyd wasn't, you know what I mean? Just imagine if these events didn't happen, like Ahmaud Arbery, nobody would even talked about it. Like
Right.
Ahmaud Arbery's, they're about to like let it go until they released the footage, thinking that the public will see, like, yeah, he deserved to die. Like people are like, what? That's not right. So it's not. I feel bad. I'm not saying it's like kind of a blessing in disguise because now you're seeing that people actually do care. You know?
And I love it because you're finally seeing. I posted something about it was a little bit of a joke about how all these companies are all of a sudden sending out emails saying, "Oh, we stand for equality
Right.
and we're da da da," and it's like, okay. So during Corona, I get 50 emails from every single gym, supermarket, retail that I ever bought from saying, "We are here for you during the times of Corona." And now that this happened, all of a sudden I'm getting emails from the same companies. We stand, like we stand against racism. Da, da.
Yeah.
And at first I poked fun of it because I was like, okay, an email is not making change exactly. Like you're
Right.
sending out an email to appease your clients. But then I had a conversation with someone and I was thinking about it. And you know what? They've not sent emails out before. Maybe they are caving to social pressures, but they're sending out emails. They're doing something. There is change happening. And I teach high school, and something that I've been so proud of is that I've seen my students get out there and get active. I've had students that have been actively posting things. I've had students that have been attending protests at Barclays Center in the city. I've had students talking about these real issues that people didn't really want to talk about before because it was uncomfortable.
Right.
And it makes me happy and it makes me proud. Also, it scares me because even though I'm like brown and Middle Eastern, and we talked about how I could be a victim of racism in my community, I am technically considered white, right?
Yeah.
I am from a middle class community. I was blessed. I feel like I don't know a lot about my black students. I don't know how to show them that I'm there for them. I don't know how to start a conversation about hate and about intolerance. It scares me as an educator. And I know a lot of white teachers that are having these conversations where they're like,
they're super scared.
I don't know how to talk about this because I feel like I might say the wrong thing. Whatever I say might be misinterpreted. I might hurt someone. It might get sticky. But at the same time, we're trying to make an effort. Like I reached out to a few of my black colleagues and I asked them, I don't know black literature. I need you to tell me. I need you to tell me, what books do I need to be reading? What books do I need to be reading with my classes? Like, teach me, talk to me, tell me, because that's the only way that I'm going to learn. And I find that I'm grateful to God that this is happening in the Jewish community for the first time. There's conversations that are being had about this. Is how can we reach out to other communities? Like in Crown Heights is a very big neighborhood where the Jewish and the black community literally they live like right next to each other. And there was a lot of tensions earlier on in the year. There were a lot of like fist fights. There was a lot of fighting. There's a lot of, but now for the first time, I'm seeing a lot of activity on Facebook. I'm seeing a lot of, we're hosting a Shabbat meal. Would you like to come? We'd like to invite you to prayers at the synagogue. We'd like to have a meal, like a barbecue, where we can just sit down and talk. We can just get to know each other because I have all these misconceptions about you and you have all these misconceptions about me. And I don't like you because of these misconceptions, and you don't like me because of these misconceptions. Let's tear those walls down. Let's talk to each other. What's the origin of your name? What's your favorite holiday? What's your favorite tradition?
Right.
Like, it's all about the humanity, and I wish that we could just get there, and we could just like it's part of the. I'm rambling now. I do.
No, you're not rambling.
Sorry.
I mean, no, it's not rambling. I mean, I think you make accurate points, and it's just like a lot of teachers are scared. I work with teachers; they're freaking scared. They don't know how to talk about this. I had a lot of teachers talk to me like I had no idea that this was happening. It's like really, and it's just like people are divided. It's section like communities. Like, oh, this is a black problem. This is this problem. We're this. We're that. We're that. Until everyone realizes like we're all human, man. It's all human, but it's ingrained in society that black people are this. Black people make most of the prison population. Like, why is it there? Like, where did the police come from? Were there slave patrollers and stuff like that? the conversations being had, and I think the best thing is to not be scared to embrace, and you have to fail, you know. You have to fail. There's plenty of times I had to learn about women. So like when I came from Florida, I realized that oh freak, I'm male chauvinistic. I had no idea. I had no idea that I was like that. I had no idea that holding a door for somebody could be seen like that, or telling boys open the door for the girls and just saying like, no, that's not a man's job. She can open the door for herself. I had to learn that coming here. I was like,
I mean, I'm fine
Southern.
if the guy opens the door for me.
I know, but it's something like when I got here, it was just like, no, we don't. You shouldn't teach girls that. I was like, oh, sorry, I didn't know
Right.
that it was
Yeah.
like me thinking that, or just like to the point when I got here, it's just like a lot of female comments were like very surprised, like how nice I was. Like, you don't want anything out of me? I was like, no, freak, what do I want from you? No, I'm just being nice. I had to learn everything. I had to learn, like, I had a gay roommate when I was in, like, at Disney World. We learned so much about each other. Like, it's me, he was the dirtiest dude I ever lived before. I was like, man,
How did you adapt to that?
I had the conception that everybody was clean. I was like, this is the dirtiest gay person I ever met in my life. I thought you were clean, prestigious. He's dirty. He doesn't wash himself. He does everything else. But when I was in college, I had a lot. I mean, when I was in high school, I had a lot of gay friends that were in high school, and we were just always cool. Like I never felt like they were different. I just, they chose to do something different. But I think growing up in Europe made me more open to like this society. Like one of my good friends. Oh, yeah, good friend. He's transitioning to a woman. Well, he's a woman now. She's a woman now, excuse me. But when he was transitioning, I had no idea. He's like, did you know I got pretty? I was like, I just thought you're just an average looking man, And he goes, you didn't think I was getting beautiful? I was like, you've been the average, yeah, you were pretty, but I just thought you were losing weight. And he goes, no, I got my hips done. I was like, oh, freak, I didn't know that. But it was just like me knowing that your name is Margot now, and that's how you want to be called, so I'm going to call you Margot. Like this guy named Roy Wood Jr. had this good point. He goes, if you have a problem calling a transgender by the name they want to, he's like, stop calling Hulk Hogan Hulk Hogan. His name is Terry. We call wrestlers by their name. I was like, yeah. So it was just like when I was at Disney World and I was in high school, and I remember just nothing but gay dudes, and we were just all cool. One of my good friends' name is Leroy. And we're definitely polar opposite people. Like, when we see us walking together, you would think he's my boyfriend. That's how pretty he is. He's, like,
Wow.
amazing. But it's just to the point where I was like, what's the difference between me and him? Nothing. I got two gay dudes that go to my church, and they're actually more fun. You know what I mean? I thought they were married, but turns out they're not married. But it's curious to be like, these are still people. I can still show the love of God to anybody. So what? You don't look like me. So what? You don't feel like me. It's like, what's wrong with just treating a person like a person? There's no reason to discriminate or take rights away. Like, freak it. We're all God's children.
I guess I have a question for you then, is that do you feel like you might have a different perspective than the generations before you, like your parents or your grandparents? Do you feel like, and I'm thinking about the same thing with myself, do you feel like you and I were both raised in, I'm assuming it was a religious upbringing,
Yeah,
right?
Christian household.
Yeah. So you and I, we both come from these conservative religious upbringings, and we both have these very different views where we're more embracing of humanity, and we're trying to learn, and we're trying to get to know people in spite of, how uncomfortable it might be for us or how different they might be. Do you think that we have a very different view than our parents or our grandparents?
My grandmother,
Not that
my grandfather, I remember his brother, he told me a story how his brother fled North Carolina because he was making out with his wife at the time, and she's very high yellow, and they thought she was a white woman. So someone came and like tried to kill him because they thought he was kissing a white woman, and he beat up this guy, and then he had to flee and move from North Carolina to New York. So there's like a lot of waters in New York, and my grandfather, like, he wasn't aware like you could date white girls. So like I remember showing him my phone, like, look at that white girl right there. He goes, what is that boy doing with that girl? I said, that's his girlfriend. Come on, what? Are you kidding me? I was like, no, that's his girl. Oh, come on, what? I said, look at their mixed kids. Oh, he crazy. So it was just like different. Like my grandfather, he had I remember he used to say I knew he was joking, but at the same time he would say stuff like this. He goes, if the Bible says women shall honor their husband, or women shall obey their husband, for this is right. He goes, if I tell my wife to shut up, she's supposed to shut up, right? He said that in front of the whole church. He said that in front of like Sunday school, right? I know he was saying that to start a debate, but he had all daughters and 2 boys. He had 10 kids. He had he had 2 boys with my grandmother and 4 boys with another woman and like 6 girls with that. But I remember my aunts telling him, "That's not right. Women are not supposed to submit them. Women are not supposed to just shut up and everything else." And I remember being young, listening to this story, realizing like, oh, this is not. I shouldn't be able to treat a woman this way. I shouldn't tell her to shut up, and she's supposed to shut up. And with like, I think it's because my mother probably thought I was gay growing up. She would always ask me, not in a derogatory way. She was like, "If you're gay, I support you." I was like, "Why do you keep saying that?" But I wasn't dating. I didn't tell them about my dating life. But she kept saying like, "I support you," and she was like very encouraging. And my dad was like very encouraged. Like, "Look, whatever happens to you, we're still gonna love you." And I think the reason why I might be different is because I didn't grow up in America that long.
Where were you raised?
I was raised in the Netherlands and Japan. So I was raised with all these people from different world. Like when you're a military brat, there was like gay people in my school. They were white. They were everything else. Poor people, rich people, Muslim people, everything else. So I was in the school of all these people, and I would just ask questions. I would just ask all the time, like, why is this? Why is that? And like even when I was in Israel, I would just ask questions. I was like, all right, well, you guys are doing a bar mitzvah. I'll do one.
That was awesome.
Everybody's like, what? I was like, Jesus did it. Shoot, I'll do it. Why not? I'll do it. Why not? Sign me up.
Yeah.
So like my parents are they're open. They're open. They're open. They're not homophobic or anything else or like Islamophobic. But like me having these conversations, like I have a different perspective because I grew up in it. You know, my father's experienced racism a whole lot heavier than I have because he was a black dude as an officer in the military, and he had to experience microaggressions and stuff like that. So the stuff he told me when I was growing up, I didn't know until I experienced it. It's like, oh, this is what he's talking about. Oh, this is why I can't go to this certain house, or this is why this parent told me, yeah, that's nice, but stay out. Don't come to this neighborhood this type of night. I was like, I live here. Oh, well, just stay near your house at night. So it's just like, I guess I would thank him for showing us the world, for me being more inclusive. And I think being more in comedy, like I meet all these different people, and when someone tells me they're hurt by something that I say, I try to let them, okay, I just want you to see why this joke is funny, and realize like I'm not going this angle. I'm trying to make light of a situation that might happen. He's like, no, I'm not going to just take, if everyone's bullying something, I'm going to try to make it lighter and try to, it's like, oh, well, think about funny like this. But it's I think it's, you know, it's hard being not neutral, but being open.
Yeah.
You know, because listening to my lady talk about men and hearing women talk about men, I had no idea. No idea. I'm sitting there like, what? How did you see that? You don't see this guy being creepy? I was like, no, I thought he was being nice. Because you're not a dude. Oh, all right, freak. All right, fine. Okay. Well, I'm here to learn. I'm here to learn. Or like someone's like, this is an all boys club. I was like, what are you talking about? And I was like, oh, yes, maybe this is a boys club. I didn't even realize it like this. And it's a charge sometimes when you're a black dude that you have to try to look out for people that look like you. And there's a lot of teachers, I call them blindside teachers, where they look at black students and they feel like they have to save them and not give them the proper teaching because they're just like, oh, he has it so hard and he has it so hard like this. I say, yeah, but you're not assessing him the right way because you're giving him a pass because you think you know what's going on in his life.
You just reminded me. I had an interesting journey. I mean, there are many Orthodox teachers. Did we break up? Could you hear me?
No, good. Keep going.
Okay. Yeah. There are many Orthodox teachers that teach in public school. Most of them, however, are in their 40s, 50s. A lot of them are older. They've been doing it for years already. It's being a city worker. You know, it's good pension, good health benefits, salary. You don't find a lot of very religious Jews teaching in public school that are younger, like in their 20s, much. And if you do, it's usually because they're OT, PT, speech providers. They come in, do the work, and leave.
Right.
So when I started teaching, I got plunked in a school, which is a very high percentage of immigrants. And I was just gobsmacked. I was completely lost. Like the first time I walked into a public school building ever in my life was when I was student teaching. I walk into the building and there's people, different colors, races, countries, headgear, clothing, just coming, going. I was like, what is happening? And then I see 2 kids openly making out in the hallway, and I'm like, rooted to the spot. Are they allowed to do that? Like, there's a kid who's like, boxers are like falling, and I'm like, young man, your pants are falling, and he gives me a look like, what the hell? And I'm just, it is a foreign place, Jared, foreign place. And the teacher who's mentoring me picks me up, and I'm like, there are children that are kissing in the hallways. She's like, oh yeah, it happens here. And I'm like, but and there was a kid that jumped on top of another kid and was tackling him. Yeah, they're just goofing around. I was like, the N-word. They're all using the N-word. They're being, what's up, Matt? And she's like, I mean, they use it with each other. Like, I was just confused and lost. And that first day, I remember sitting down and talking to her, and I was like, Michelle, I don't know how I could possibly be a good public school teacher. I'm confused and lost. I don't know any of these kids. I don't know any of their backgrounds. I have never been in a public school building before. This is weird. I feel like Alice in Wonderland wandering through this. She was like, Sarah, all you got to do is talk to them. Get to know each kid based on their level. Show them you care about them. Get to care about them. And that's it. You'll be the best teacher in the world. That's all you got to do. And I was like, but, like, how do I... there's kids from, like, Bangladesh and Somalia, and, like, there's the kids that only speak Chinese, and the kids that, like, how am I supposed to... Sarah, just show them that you care about them, and you'll be fine. Thank God, fast forward 3 years, and she was right. Jared, she was so right. It's, like, the smallest things. Walking up to a kid and being like, you know, you have such a great fashion sense. She's got blue hair and, like, 3 nose rings, and, like, you've got a really cool fashion sense, right? The kid who's, like, slam dunking his textbook in the garbage can, like, you are a great athlete. Like, finding things to talk to the kids about. And specifically with what you're saying about teachers with black kids, like, I had this one student. It was my first year teaching, and I didn't know how to handle him. His name was Jace. Tall, skinny kid, like 6'5", black kid. He kind of came into class, and he smelled like weed. And in my head, I'm like, I don't know how to reach this kid. Like, this kid, I can't, like, how am I supposed to connect with him? I don't. Right. He doesn't come to class. When he does, he's high. And so I thought to myself, okay, well, you know what? Your classroom stinks now like weed because it's a very heavy smell. So I went to, like, Target, and I bought these little, like, peppermint Febrezes that were, like, it was, like, December. So I bought this, like, peppermint stick smelling Febreze, and I put a red bow on it. And I just walked over to him after class, and I was like, Jace, hey, man, you know, I know that, like, Christmas is coming up, and I know that you celebrate, and I know that sometimes it could get a little smelly in here, if you know what I'm saying. I notice you always, like, open the windows, but it doesn't really get rid of the smell, so I got you, like, a nice little Christmas gift. And I give him this Febreze, and in my head, I'm like, he's gonna think you're crazy. He's gonna think you're nuts. He's never gonna talk to you again. He's probably gonna make fun of you to, like, everybody that he knows. You're probably gonna look like an idiot. This is dumb. What are you doing? He, like, takes it. He sprays it. He's like, damn, this smells good. Thanks. He came back to class the next day. He comes to me with another friend of his. He's like, yo, this is my friend Latrell. He wants to know if, like, you have any more of them. I was like, oh, you liked it? He's like, yeah, it was, like, a cool gift. Like, I'm going to use it now in my backpack. I was like, okay. So, and then the next day he came back, and I had a conversation with him. I was like, look, I need to talk to you about something because I'm confused. I've never used weed in my life. I noticed that every time you come in, it just smells like weed. And I'm talking to you right now, like, as a person. Like, I'm not a teacher. I'm not reporting you. I'm not getting you in trouble. I just want to know, like, what is it that makes you want to use it, and why so often? And do you feel like maybe it's why you miss class? And you are a senior. Like, don't you want to graduate? And don't you want to, you know? And my heart is pounding the entire time that I'm having this conversation with him because I'm like, he can like walk away. He can judge me. I don't know where, like, is this even going to work? Is he going to think that I'm like pandering? Is he going to think I'm sincere? And he sat down with me and he was like, you know something? Nobody's ever asked me that in my life. Like, I've had a lot of teachers and nobody has ever asked me why I smoke weed. I smoke it because I like it, because it makes me feel good. Because I like it. And I was like, okay, but And he was like, yo, you never tried? I could get you some. I was like,
I
no, no, no,
could
no, no, no.
get you
Oh,
some.
thank you. That is not where this conversation is going. I just want to know, like, I really care about you. Can you please start coming to class? Like, maybe try to smoke your weed, like earlier in the morning or like later at night, like after my class, maybe. And he showed up the next day, and I didn't smell anything, and I was like, but is this because of my conversation? Like, what?
Yeah.
And it was, he never missed class. He came back to class every single day, and like he missed a couple of times, but he came back and he passed my class with like an 80. And then I went to the graduation ceremony, right? And at the graduation ceremony, I went over to him and I was like, Chase, it's good to see you, like, meet your mom. He pulls over his mom. He pulls me over and he's like, Mom, this is the teacher I was telling you about. This is Miss B. This is that teacher that I told you about, the tough love. She's the reason I'm graduating. And she's like, I love her. And I'm just standing there hearing this. And I'm like, wow, I had no idea that you felt that. He's like my favorite teacher. And she's like, she gives a shit about people and she talks to them. And for me, it was the most like affirming moment in my teaching career. I felt so good about myself in that moment. And I was like, I want to thank you, Jace, because you taught me something. Like, I was really ready to write you off as this like pothead kid who never comes to class, is going to fail my class, whatever. I have like 72 other kids to care about and worry about, but I really wanted to know about you, and I wanted to know like what it was. And I had a super awkward conversation with you that I never thought I would ever have with a student. And look where we are today. Like, he's working at an airport now and he's going to college.
See, that's the thing with the older grades. You get to see the progress in kindergarten. We see the progress like years later, and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But I think it's so much. I think it's just being nice to person. People don't understand. Being nice goes so far. Even if you don't know a person, just being nice to somebody goes so far. And I think when we first met at Talmud, it's just like seeing someone who's nice goes a whole lot better because we're all like fish out of water. Some people like knew Israel. Like like in the north, like clearly I realized like all the people who weren't Jewish are inside my little area. I was like, oh freak, you're Christian. Oh, did they put us all up here together? I was like, oh, I guess we're not, because my friend, I don't know, it's kind of crazy that every person from our Talmud class, I keep working with them. I don't know if you met Emily Carson. I don't know if you met her before. She's my principal. Molly,
Wow.
she was in Jerusalem. She works with me. I've met like 5 different Talmud people. I just saw Laura Tico, like all these Talmud people. We just run into each other, and I've been that person. Like when you bounce around from different countries a lot, you make friends fast, and you just always like check in. So when I'm always like checking in on people, it's like nothing weird. I'm just like, I just want to know how people are doing. Like, hey, if now you have a podcast, you can be like, hey, this moment is in time now. It's like a time capsule of just like, oh, what was she like June 24th, 2020? Like, imagine giving this to your kids like 10 years from now. Like, this is what your mom was like. Like, what? You were like this?
I think it's amazing that you do this. I had a very difficult experience at Talma. I think we like touched on it before. I was the one. There were 100 teachers. I was the one Orthodox one. There were 99 teachers there that were all a very big combination of like conservative, reform. There weren't really modern Orthodox people. Like maybe one, like Jillian, a sweetheart who lived in Tzfat, the Tzfat location. She was becoming more religious, but no one there was like me. And I show up and I have my long skirt and my long sleeves. And I don't know if you remember this, but that first day of training in Tel Aviv, Alon brought in the former prime minister, the former minister of education.
Yes,
sorry, Yuli Tamir. Yeah. Do you remember what happened?
I know everybody was half asleep. You said something, right? I think you were the one that spoke up and said something, right?
Yes. So that was our first day of training, our first day of lectures.
Oh, he said something disrespectful about he said something about Orthodox Jewish people, and you stood up and goes, "I'm Orthodox Jewish, and I don't think like that." Yeah. That's how. I was like, "Oh, she's Orthodox. I thought she was Brazilian."
That's interesting that you thought that, but it was just such a funny experience because I entered this whole thing thinking, oh, it's going to be a bunch of like religious Jews, and we're going to have our synagogues and our prayers and our kosher food, and then I'm sitting in this hotel room in Tel Aviv. I'm the only one in like a blazer with long sleeves and a dress to my knees. Everyone else is in summer shorts and short sleeves, and I'm realizing very, very quickly this is not an Orthodox religious program, which was fine, but I realized that I was a sore thumb, and I'm the one Orthodox person in the entire program. And then they brought up a speaker, and the speaker was the former Minister of Education. And she's a wonderful person, and she did a lot for Israel. But she starts giving a speech about how there are many problems with Israeli education, and it's so sectionalized and polarized. There's like the private schools want to do their own thing, and the religious schools want to do their own thing, and
Right.
they don't really like having curriculums being given to them, and they don't really want to teach, what they're being told to teach, and they don't really care about college and the Bagrut exams. And then she made a statement, and I'm listening to this, and I felt so much pain, and it was that, the Haredi people, the Orthodox community, does not really care for education. They don't really go for degrees. They don't really pursue college. They don't really, take education seriously. And I'm listening to this, and I look behind me, and you're right, there were people that were sleeping. But a lot of people were looking at her and absorbing this information and nodding their heads. And I don't know what possessed me, because this was literally the first day. Like, if you're going to screw up on a program, let it be towards the end. Don't let it be like day one, and don't let it be in front of every single person and in front of the former Minister of Education. But I just found myself standing up in front of 100 people and just being like, I'm really sorry. I don't mean to be disrespectful. My name is Sarah, and I'm Orthodox. I have 2 college degrees. And I taught in yeshiva for 5-6 years. Orthodox people care about education. They just don't necessarily want to teach concepts like sexuality and evolution because it goes against their beliefs. But they care a lot about education and literacy and reading and writing. And, to portray an entire community as illiterate or as not caring about education, it's not right. And I welcome every single person here. Come over to me, ask me questions. Like you can see by the sleeves, I am Orthodox. I do have a certain lifestyle, and I welcome questions. The whole point of Talmud is to learn and to educate yourself. And then I just sit down, and I have this whole ocean of thoughts in my head, like, they're going to kick me out. They're going to send me home. I'm screwed. I'm dead. What have I just done? And in a way, I did set myself up, because what happened was, over the next few weeks, people kept coming to me and saying things like, oh, so Orthodox people, you have sex through a hole in the sheets, right?
What? They were saying that stuff to you?
Yes, people said that to me.
I remember when you said that, I was like, wow, that's pretty cool. She just stood up in front of everybody else. She's Orthodox. I didn't even know that. I just thought she just had long dresses. I was like, that's an interesting choice of clothes, because it was hot out there. I was hot as F when I got there.
It was very hot.
But I was like, wow, she doesn't even sweat. What type of clothes is she wearing? She doesn't even sweat. And when you said that, I was like, wow, like that. So when we try to, every time we had a conversation, there's always 15 people around. And I was like, man, she must be pretty popular. But I know you guys were fighting up there. Like your group, you guys had mad fights out there.
No, people were very curious, and they came up to me, and I got heated at times because people would say things to me like, so why do the Orthodox people not want to work? How come they want to mooch off society? And I was like, the fact that they don't want to join the military doesn't mean they don't want to work. It just means they don't want to stop being religious. The military does not really let you, keep Shabbat, and it's very hard to keep prayer schedules and be religious in the military. And by the way, there's a whole section of military people that are religious Jews that are all officers and they're serving. And I had people say to me things like, so are you forced to marry? Like, are you being in an arranged marriage? Like, do you have any say in who your husband is? I had people say to me, oh, you're going to the beach in a bathing suit? Are you even allowed to? Like, are you going to get in trouble? People would say some things that were really hurtful and really misconceptions, and I would try my best.
I'm sorry that you experienced that. I think it's because some people are just around the country is kind of ignorant to what's going on. Right. And I really think if you were in the north, we had a hotel. Were you at a hotel?
No. So the other thing is we were in a youth village. We were in Ayanot. It was kind of like a kibbutz. It was like a farm where they had dormitory buildings. And people could live there. But I think it was more than that. It was just, I'll give you an example. Like when the group would go to dinner, right? So your whole group, you'd go out to dinner with your mentor, right? Yeah. Did you have that?
We were in a hotel. We all had hotels, so we would all meet at the pool sometimes. But it was kind of split by fours. Like if sometimes your mentor would be 4, but it was more everyone's either Christian. What is that? Yeah. What's the type of Jewish person that you believe in Jesus?
Jews for Jesus?
No. It's called
Oh, a Jesuit?
Not a Jesuit. I wanna know what it is. I forgot. My cousin is one of those. It's not his. I gotta Google right here.
Go for it.
Believe in Jesus. Okay, it is called. You are Messianic Jewish people. That's what it was.
Messianic Jews.
We had a lot of. There are Messianic Jewish people. Then Alone, Alone was really on our side because his wife was there at the time when they were dating. So we saw Alone a lot. So it was
Right.
Alone, and everyone else were like it was very like hippie. It was very just like everyone. We only had like a few arguments, but we're in the north. We're kind of away from everybody, and it was quiet and it was cold up there. So like
Wow.
everyone would have like I've realized that you guys group like I think when we all meet up for Shabbat, I was like, man, you guys seem kind of wild. Like the Jerusalem group seemed wild. Everyone else seemed wild. Like there's like that was more like Jersey Shore. I was like, you guys are like on the Jersey Shore or something like that.
So I know it was interesting. We had a bookshelf with like 6 shelves, and the group would go out and buy wine every so often. And then every single night after a day of teaching and grouping, we had these torn up sofas that were in front of our dorm building, like literally sofas with sagging, broken leather and holes and the stuffing coming out of it. And everyone would just sit on these sofas in the evening breeze, and they would drink wine, pass around the wine glass, play card games, play truth or dare, things like that, and then stack up the empty wine bottles on this bookshelf. So after our stint in Talma, we had like a very tall bookshelf with 6 shelves just covered in empty wine bottles that they had drunk over their Talmud term. And it was interesting for me because, again, I was the only Orthodox person, and I'm sitting there. Everybody's in like skimpy shorts and tanks, and they're drinking and they're smoking weed, and they're sitting there playing Never Have I Ever and their Never Have I Ever games.
Oh yeah, you
There
kept
was one
losing.
girl in particular.
I remember that one.
It was like one girl from Australia in particular who liked to kind of like shock me. So I would be sitting there because I did feel isolated, but I did want to be social. So I would join them. And they would be like, oh, never have I ever had sex. And then everybody would turn to look at me, and I would be like, oh, great. Are we making this a thing now? Because I had spoken about sexuality and intimacy to one person there, and I admitted that I was a virgin and I'm waiting for marriage. And it became a whole thing. And they were like, oh, Sarah, put your finger up, like in a semi-mocking, joking way. And then they would make very wildly inappropriate sex jokes that I laugh about now because it's funny. But back then, like, I would sit there frozen and my face would turn red and I would feel so uncomfortable. I was just a sore thumb there. I really was. Like, I never smoked weed. I would just sit there while they would smoke. I would, and there were moments where I felt like the group had a certain closeness and I was like the outsider.
Wow.
And something else that really bothered me is that I struggled with religion when I was there. Like, there was a Shabbat when, we're not supposed to use technology on Shabbat. You're not supposed to use your phone when you're Sabbath observant. There was one weekend that I was feeling really, really lonely, really, really sad, really homesick. I was like excluded from everybody's plans because people made Shabbat plans and they wouldn't invite me because, oh, you're the Sabbath observant person. We're not going to invite you because you can't be in the car with us. You can't drive with us. We're doing a trip to the Dead Sea. Like, why would it? And my response would be like, okay, but you guys are driving up there on Thursday. Let me come with you. And then on Shabbat, I'll do my own thing. I was very much like excluded from everybody's plans. And so I took out my phone and I used it. I like watched a comedy or some such. And someone from the group had seen me using my phone and basically started like a whole thing telling everyone else like, oh, she's fake Orthodox. Today she's religious. Tomorrow she's not. And I overheard the gossip about me, and it was so painful and it was so hurtful. And like, are you telling me that you never struggled with religion? Like, you never? And then immediately after using my phone, I cried and I felt so guilty. And I was like, I'm sorry, God, for doing this. I shouldn't have. But I was feeling really lonely and really sad, and I needed something to like do with my, So that's just, there was that. And then there were times when the group would go out for a meal. And so in the north, we were in hotels, and Ayanot, we were in this kibbutz where they served dinner in a kitchen. But on occasion, they closed the kitchen, so the group, we would rent cars, pile into the cars, drive to the city of Rishon, and then everybody would go to a restaurant for dinner. So the first time we go into the restaurant, and I see cheeseburger on the menu, Now I'm starving because I have not eaten since like the afternoon, and at this point it's like 7 in the evening, and I'm like, shit, this place is not kosher. And so I turned to our mentor and I'm like, I can't eat here. He's like, oh, like, what's the problem? You could just take the cheese off the burger. And I'm like, how do I explain to him that that's not how kosher works? You can't just remove, because in kosher diets, you can't have meat and dairy. They're separate.
Right.
So it would seem logical, like, oh, just take the cheese off and eat it. But no, it's the entire kitchen has to be kosher. The meat has to be slaughtered with a kosher knife. And you can't have dairy and meat mixed up. Like, it has to be a kosher restaurant, from their cutlery to their meat to their dishes, not just
right.
So I say to him, like, I'm so sorry, but I really can't eat here, and I'm really hungry. He was like, oh, well, can we, like, maybe, like, we can't order food from another place to a restaurant. You can't, like, and people were not hearing me, and it was really frustrating, and I felt like now I'm a burden because of my religious beliefs. I just Googled a kosher restaurant nearby. I found a burger place, and I said to the mentor in the group, like, okay, I hope you don't mind. I'm going to go get food. I'm starving. I'm going to go, you know, eat at that place, and I'll come back and join you guys. And they were like, okay, go, like, have fun. And I remember going to that kosher burger place where everyone was either in couples or with families. And I walk in alone, and the hostess is like, one? And I'm like, yes. And I sit down at this very large table on my own, and I'm just, like, looking at the menu, and I start to tear up, and I'm like, God damn it. So I order the food, and I start eating it, and then I finish my meal on my own. And this family that was sitting there saw me looking very sad, and they waved me over, and they're like, Boy, Shvita, and they're like, come sit with us. Why are you alone? And I'm like, I had to make something up because I was so embarrassed. So I was just like, I'm traveling, I'm touring here, visiting on my own. So they were like, come join us. So I sat with them, and then we finished eating, and at the end I went back to the other restaurant where everyone was like finished up and heading back to the cars. And it was not the only time, but I want to like give a shout out to Alon, because that weekend that we came back from the Shabbat, and the bus pulled up to like a mall. There was a giant mall. There was a McDonald's there. And there was, like,
I remember that.
There. Do you remember that time? Yeah.
Yes.
So everybody's starving because it's like 10 o'clock at night, and everybody's like hitting town and excited and going out. And I'm like, oh God, McDonald's is not kosher. There's nothing kosher here. So I found a pharmacy, and I bought like a pack of chips. And I remember being so hungry and feeling so sad again, and thinking, like, is this what religion does to you? It alienates you from people, and like, it just, you know. And then my mentor saw me holding this pack of chips, and I think at that point he understood like how frustrating and sad it was. So he reached out to Alon, and God bless Alon. He drove all the way to a kosher sushi place, and he picked up kosher sushi, and he drove all the way to Ayanot, and he delivered kosher food to me, and he gave me the sushi. And I remember like taking a picture of it and smiling and eating it and feeling so good. I felt like, here's a man who's not necessarily keeping all the laws, but is a Jew. And he can see that I'm in pain and I'm hungry and I'm frustrating, and he goes out of his way to go buy kosher food and make sure that I have food to eat. Like, I was so grateful to him in that moment, and I had a lot of gratitude for it.
Shout out to Alon. He's a father now.
Shout out to Alon.
Shout out
He's
to
really
Alon,
good
father of one. We were there when he was dating Mital. And I was like,
yes.
I wonder
they have
why.
Such a cute baby now.
I wonder why he's here all the time. Are we in trouble? Then I realized, like, oh no, he's not stopping at this room. Okay, now we know who he's visiting. I think that like growing up, when you're growing around, I'm more of not a loner, but I know I'm a chameleon. I can blend in with everything else. So my motto, like in the Bible, it says expect the unexpected. So I don't expect anything out of nobody. You know, like I had that sucks that you experienced that, and I probably feel like, I think your group was like the loudest people, right? Those were one always drinking all the time. I think that last final night, and I think I asked you, I was like, why? I was like, are you guys always this loud? And then you're like, trust me, this isn't even a half of it. Because we're at that hotel when everyone's leaving. I think that's when we had our first like real conversation. But I was like, man, it seems like you guys just drink all the time. Everybody's just party, but everyone from North, we're just mad chill. I think it's because we were all like older. Everyone was like 29, 28, and they had families and stuff like that.
My group had a lot of people in their younger 20, like it was like 25, 26, 24. We had a couple of older people, but it was definitely like a frat house environment. A lot of partying, but they were all very good people. I managed to connect with some really cool people. Like Olivia, she was very maternal and kind towards me. I think because she was OG, her and Nick, I don't know if you remember either Olivia or Nick. They were both
that.
people who had done the program times before, and they saw that I was struggling, and they saw that it was really hard for me. And Olivia would make it a point to reach out to me whenever she was going to a grocery. She'd be like, "I know you need kosher food. Do you want to come with us?"
Wow.
Nick would be like, he was the guy that was like smoking every night. He'd be like, "I know you don't smoke, and I know that you and I are very different. I'm like here with my alcohol and my weed, and you're like literally like clutching your knees, looking at everyone like, where the hell am I? But you know what? I'm gonna take time to sit down and talk to you and get to know you." Like Nick sat down and asked me questions about Judaism and about the community. There were some really, really good people there that, and like Willie was also a really sweet guy.
Oh, I know Willie. Yeah. Oh, Willie.
Yeah,
Willie
you
Beamer.
remember Willie? He's a
Yeah.
cool dude.
He's in the Bay Area.
Yeah, and he also took time to sit down and talk to me. Like someone had made a really not nice comment to me, and I was really hurt by it. So I, of course, being defensive, responded back in a not nice way. It was really immature. I look back on that and I regret it. But the next day I felt so badly about it. I went over to her to apologize, and I was like, "Hey, let's call her X. Hey X, I lashed out at you after you said something not nice about Orthodox Jews, and I'm really sorry. Like, it was wrong, and I shouldn't have done that. And I hope you can apologize. Like, I hope you can accept my apology, and we can forgive and be friends." And she just takes one look at me, and she's like, "Friends? I don't want to be friends with you. No, I don't forgive you." And then she, like, turns around and walks off. And I remember, like, sitting there on the sofa shocked and shaking, and I was crying a little bit. And so Willie comes over, and I told him what happened, and he was like, "Oh, look, X is not, like, healthy, and X is going through a really hard time in her life right now. You have to forgive X. Like, you have to be the bigger person here. Like, I'm sure that X didn't mean it, and X is just going through a lot of pain, and as soon as you understand that, like, you know,
yeah,
it's easier to forgive her and just, like, don't take it personally." And he was such a good guy. Like, he sat with me and he comforted me. He's a really good guy. There were many really wonderful, wonderful people on Tama. And I'm so happy that I got to meet you on Tama, and I'm so happy that it connected us. And I want to talk to you after this. I feel like I don't know your whole story yet. I want to know you. I want to know your story.
Come, I tell people to come to the shows. I find people. That's the thing. I'll find, like, I forgot. I just find people. I don't know if you met Jacqueline Weinrib. She went to Talma, and I was like, "Hey, let's sit down." And we just like, yeah, we did a podcast too. She talked about her experience at Talma. I think we were all more like, we were like going to rivers and creeks and like swimming in water. And I'm not good with water that I don't know the size of the creek. You know what I mean? I was like, is this 5 feet or 8 feet? Because I can, you know. But we will. These are our last questions. This is a great one. These are called the hilltop questions. Ready?
Mm-hmm.
These are hilltops. Now, you can answer it any way you want to. It doesn't have to be short form. It doesn't have to be long form. However it goes is how it goes. Okay. Are you ready?
Yes.
All right. Question number 1. Do you believe in God?
I do.
Who's your favorite person in the Bible or the Torah? Your favorite person inside there.
God, there's too many.
You gotta pick one. Your favorite person.
Oh man. Okay. I love a woman that many people have not heard of. Her name is Rachav. I believe the English terminology would be Rahab or Rahab. I'm not sure how it's pronounced. She was a prostitute who was very well sought out in the community of Jericho, I believe it was.
Yeah,
and
she's the mother of Boaz.
She ended up marrying the second in command, who eventually became the first in command. Let me just get her. Hang on. Here we go. Okay, so it's Rahab, Rahab.
Mm-hmm. She's in the book of Joshua.
Yes, she is. She married Yehoshua. I'm trying to think how to Englishize. She lived in Jericho, which is the Hebrew terminology. She was the most sought out prostitute in the land. She was a beautiful woman, highly intelligent, and she lived in the fortress, in the towers. Now, the Jews were trying to get through, and so 2 men that were sent to do reconnaissance and check out the area,
yes,
they were being pursued by soldiers. They were going to be killed, and Rachav took them and she hid them,
yes,
in her room, in her
Salmon,
tower.
right?
Yeah.
Salmon.
Yes. And one of those men was Yehoshua. Yehoshua, who was basically Joshua, who was the highest in command. He was Moses' second. What was the term used? The hip hop term?
Second in command.
Second in command, right?
Take him to the promised land.
He was a Torah scholar. He was a brilliant scholar. He was a military general. He was the second in command to the Moshe Rabbeinu, Moses, the highest priest. And he married her. He fell in love with her and he married her. And she was such a holy woman that she managed to go from a profession that's arguably really looked down upon to becoming one of the holiest women, a Torah scholar in her own right.
Joshua married her?
Yeah, she married Yeshua.
I don't know why I thought she married Salmon.
No. Well, I guess because maybe it's different with the New Testament and the Torah. But the Torah version is that
Joshua,
Rachel basically, she hid these men in her tower in Jericho, and she had conversations with Yeshua, and she recognized his greatness. And
yeah, Joshua, yeah,
followed him back to the camp and said, I want to learn more. I want to learn. I want to know. She was a woman who sought knowledge, a woman who didn't come from this environment and this background, but she recognized truth and holiness, and she said, I'm giving up my life that I know and the wealth that I have to come out here and learn from you. And she became his wife. He loved her, she loved him, they married, and she's one of, like, can you imagine going from that to that? I think that's such a tremendously cool transformation.
Relate? That does. How does that affect you? Is that like saying that no matter what we go through, there's always a chance for redemption?
Yeah, and not just redemption, but greatness. There's always a chance for greatness.
Ooh,
like,
I like that.
She literally went from being a prostitute all the way to being the wife of the man who was the second in command. When Moshe Rabbeinu died, Yehoshua became the first in command. He was the leader of the Jewish nation.
Took them to the promised land.
He led them into battle.
Milk and honey.
He led them exactly. He led them into Israel, the promised land, and she was his wife. She was by his side. She was the one that raised his children. She was the one that learned Torah from him and with him and taught it to the women in the nation. She became such a holy, great woman. And I think it's a pity that she's not really taught about often in the yeshivas, because I guess they don't, like, the schools are very careful when it comes to things like sex or prostitution. They're not necessarily going to teach about that. I didn't learn about her when I was in yeshiva. I learned about her on my own when I was pursuing knowledge about the Torah. And I think she's such an incredible woman.
What does her name
mean? And then
mean?
you obviously have, sorry?
What does her name mean?
Rachav. Well, Rachav is Hebrew. It translates to, like, large. But it also comes from Aramaic and Arabic. Large, broad, meaning, like, I like to interpret it as she was very large-hearted and very open-minded. Meaning she was big-hearted and open-minded. That's how I take that word of, like, large and translate it in that way, because it really takes someone who's very open-minded to think, I could get killed for hiding these men who are spies. I could lose all of my wealth. I could lose my, like, and she was looked upon as a great woman in Jericho. Like, people frequented her place often. She was a popular woman, you know?
Right.
It takes a big heart and a very open mind to talk to people that are strangers that you don't know, and to save their life and to pursue knowledge. And I really admire that in her. And then there's obviously my namesake, Sarah, who's the matriarch of the Jewish people.
You can only pick one.
I know, but there's so many.
No, you can only pick one. You can only pick one. Rechab.
Who's your favorite religious character?
Oh. My favorite one? Maybe Job.
Yeah? Yoav? The one who suffered a lot?
Yes. Is that in the Torah, Job?
It is. He was a man who lost his wife, his children, his home, his health, his lands.
Do you have
but
a
he
dog?
remained faithful to God. What?
Do you have a dog?
No, that's my younger brother, actually. What?
I thought you were pointing to a dog. I was like, what? Did dog speak English?
No. My younger brother just came downstairs, and he was, like, peeking into the room, like, so I was just pointing at him saying, just give me a second, I'm on a...
Job, yeah. Job lost everything, and he lost his wife, he lost everything, and he got it all back at the end. But he didn't curse God.
But he maintained his faith in God. He didn't give up.
That's for me.
I also think that's incredible.
When I'm in the city. Oh, is it that one? Sometimes my favorite character is David.
King David?
King David.
He's also a really cool one. Him and Solomon, the two of them.
The reason why I like David is because David was more inspiration. I don't know if you know the story of David and Goliath, right? How David like slayed
Yeah,
Goliath.
with
But
the
like
slingshot.
right, but in the Torah it talks about in general like he brought 5 stones. Like you notice like he brought 5. He brought all these stones with him. And the question was when I was talking to this rabbi, he's like I was like, why did he bring 5 stones if he was gonna kill him if he knew he would kill the giant with one? And it's what's believed in the Torah and everything else is like after he was prepared after he killed the giant to kill more. But after
Yeah.
he killed Goliath, nobody else, everyone got inspired to start slaying giants. So sometimes I feel like I'm like David, like whatever giant that I slay in my life, I want people to be inspired to slay other giants, you know? Maybe your
Yeah.
giant is in education, maybe your giant is in comedy, maybe your giant is in a documentary and you're educating more people about, how you grew up. So David's mine. Forget Job, David. David. Okay,
David, King
favorite
David.
verse in the Torah. What's your favorite verse in the Torah? Just
Oof.
one verse. Don't think of a lot. Favorite verse. Just one.
Mm.
I'm guessing none of them will come out of the New Testament. I'm just joking.
Probably not. Let me look up the exact phrasing of it. Hang on. Here we go. Okay. I'm going to give you the Hebrew. Okay. All right. I'm going to translate. First, I'll say the Hebrew, and then I'll say the English. It's in Ethics of Our Fathers, Pirkei Avot, which is part of the Torah, if you would. It's Ve'ahavta l'reacha kamocha, ze klal gadol b'Torah. That's the Hebrew verse. In the English, you should love your fellow as yourself. This is a basic principle of the Torah. Okay, so 60-second background. There are 613 commandments in Judaism that Jews follow. Now, some of these commandments are thou shalt not, like do not mix meat with dairy, do not lie, do not covet another man's wife, do not kill, etc. And some of these are do, like you should respect your parents, you should keep the Sabbath as its holy day, you should love your man as your fellow man. So these 613 mitzvot are divided into another 2 categories. Those that are between man and God, like prayer, wearing the tzitzit, wearing the skull cap. And the other category is between man and man. So 613 mitzvot that Jews are obligated to follow. People that are Orthodox, ultra-Orthodox, Hasidish usually follow many, many of them. People that are more conservative, Reform, etc., don't really follow all of them necessarily, but they keep some. And these are split into between man and God, like prayer and Shabbat, and between man and man. The one that I love the most between man and man is love your fellow man like yourself. I feel like it really epitomizes Judaism, if you would. It explains what Judaism is all about. Because what are all these laws? Why do we need to be told don't steal, don't covet, don't lie, don't etc. and so forth? Like, it all comes down to bettering yourself and bettering the people around you and leaving the world a better place. But at its core, the only way to really do that is by loving your man the way you love yourself. And a question I asked myself is, why is the commandment not just love your man, right? Why does it have to be love yourself? Like, why v'ahavta kamocha? Why you? The Torah is very deliberate when it comes to wording and phrasing. And I think it's because people struggle to love themselves, right? So I think God is giving us multiple commandments here. God is saying, I put you in this world. I put a piece of me in you. First and foremost, learn to love yourself. Don't judge yourself harshly when you fail. Don't hate yourself for all your flaws. Learn to love yourself. Once you've learned to love yourself, learn to treat everybody else with that same love that you gave yourself. I feel like it's a twofold commandment. Love yourself and love others. And through that, you'll ultimately be fulfilling all of these 613 commandments. You'll be leaving the world a better place, making yourself a better person, and making others better people. And that's why it's my favorite verse.
Okay, ready? When's the last
Yeah.
time you had a nightmare?
Pretty recently, a couple of days ago, I think. It was about my special needs brother. Again, it happens a lot of times when my parents will go upstate or they'll go somewhere and they'll ask me to stay at home and be in charge of the younger kids. I get these irrational fears. Like, did I lock all the doors? Did I close all the lights? What if, God forbid, something happens? And then sometimes at night, I'll just have these ridiculous nightmares where it's like, oh, okay, someone is, God forbid, sick or dying, and I have to, like, get to them to help them in time. I'm not going to delve into the subconscious and, like, the Freudian and the yada yada. It's probably very much connected in some way. But, yeah, it was, like, a weird nightmare about my brother being sick and, like, me having to help him.
This ties into our next question. What's your biggest fear?
Dying without having accomplished that which I was capable of accomplishing.
Oh. Okay, next question. When's the last time you had a panic attack?
COVID related. I had okay, it's personal.
Never. If it's personal, we don't. Well, we've already dug into your whole life, so if you want to keep
we have, I suppose. Okay. I usually am very calm, cool, and collected. I don't often have panic attacks. I react really well under stress. But in this particular instance, I had one sibling who was diagnosed with mental illness, one sibling who was having severe anxiety, one sibling who was who had fallen in with a bad crowd and was possibly using a substance that he should not have. I'll leave it at that to respect his privacy. And at the same time, my parents were asking me to find, like, a job for this one, a therapist for this one, a solution for this one, a program for this one. And at the same time in school, a student who had not done any work had complained that I was not helping her do the work when she had disappeared for like 5 weeks and was not responding to any of my emails. And all of this happened in the same day, like in the same 24 hours. And then immediately after that email, I got another email from an assistant principal saying, like, I'm having a meeting with you tomorrow morning via Zoom to discuss this student's complaint. So that triggered, like, even more of a, oh shit, like, what have I gotten into? And then on top of that, like, literally 10 minutes later, a friend of mine had called me to inform me that one of my students had passed away. She had overdosed. Wow. So this had all happened within, like, a 24 hours. It was like, okay, you need to find this one help. He needs to go to rehab. You need to find this one a program because too many episodes, stuck at home for COVID for too long. It's impossible to live with. And we need to also help this one with her anxiety. And this student lodged a complaint against you, which was not true. And now the assistant principal is requiring a meeting. And, oh yeah, one of your students from Yeshiva overdosed, and all in the same 24 hours. So I literally just shut my computer, shut off my phone, and I just lay flat. Wow. In the backyard, and I put on some music, and I was like, I'm not thinking, I'm just listening to music now for 10 minutes, and nobody's going to talk to me, or I will just, like, lose it. It was pretty bad. It was a bad day. Yeah.
Okay, 3 more questions. Do you believe in soulmates?
To a certain extent. Judaism believes that a person can have up to 7 soulmates. And
what do you believe?
What?
What do you believe? Do you believe
so I sort of agree. I believe that you can be soulmates with multiple people. I don't think there's one specific person. I was raised on this belief that 40 days before a person is born, God takes their soul and tears it in half.
Oh, wow.
So half of the soul, this is a Jewish belief, is that 40 days before a person is born, right, the soul is created, God tears it in half. Half of it is for the male, half of it is for the female, and then 40 days before the fetus, the baby is physically born, God announces X is destined to marry Y. So that's the base. One of the base religious beliefs is that you already, before you even pop out of the womb, you have your soulmate, and that they're waiting for you. However, there's a Kabbalistic view saying that there's no one soulmate. It's that a person has the potential to be different people with different spiritual levels and different, like, just different levels at different times in their life, and they end up with the soul that they allow themselves to be. So if, for example, I was at a certain stage in my life right now where I practice a certain level of observance and I met someone at that level of observance, we can become soulmates. Whereas if I were to wait a couple of years and grow a lot stronger in my religion and, let's say, become Hasidic or ultra-Orthodox, right, I could meet someone who is potentially then my soulmate on that level. In other words, the Kabbalistic belief is that you meet whoever you are at that time, whoever you allow yourself to be, and then they become your soulmate.
Oh.
Based on the work that you've done for yourself.
Okay. Okay, here we go.
So
what do you think happens when you die?
I believe in it to a certain extent.
Okay.
Huh?
Answer this question. What do you think happens when you die?
When you die, I think that your body is buried, your soul is elevated, and I hope that your memory lives on. I don't think that there's again, belief in the afterworld. There's the belief in resurrection, where everybody comes back and the Holy Temple is built and the Messiah arrives. Mm-hmm. I'm still in the process of reading about that and learning about that. I'm a little bit shaky on my faith in that specific area, where I believe that my soul will be reincarnated and I'll come back to life when the Messiah arrives and the Holy Temple is built. It's confusing for me. And Jews will not admit this out loud. Orthodox Jews do grapple with this belief, because it's like, if I'm coming back, how am I coming back? In this body as this person? Will my parents come back as my parents in their bodies? And where will we be living? And how is this working? And it's confusing. There's a lot of information and beliefs that we were raised with, and when you're in school, it's like, oh, I believe in this. And then when you're out of school and you start reading books, you're like, I believe in this, I don't, I'm not really sure. The answer is to be determined, still under construction.
All right, this last one is a series of questions, right? It's called Who Are You, right? I'm going to ask who are you, and you respond back, who are you? So I'll just give you an example. Every time I point, you just say, who are you, and I'll answer the question. Ready? You got to say, who are you?
Who are you?
I'm Jared Waters. Then you ask it again.
Who are you?
Stand-up comic. And I'm going to keep asking these questions until you stop, right? So the goal is to go beyond yourself, and to go beyond and just what your name is just who are you. I don't want you to think about it. You just got to go. It's just whatever's off the top of your head. Ready? Who are you?
Sarah B.
Who are you?
Daughter.
Who are you?
Playwright.
Who are you?
Teacher.
Who are you?
Poet.
Who are you?
Dreamer.
Who are you?
Giver of love.
Who are you?
Mother to many.
Who are you?
Student.
Who are you?
Seeker of knowledge.
Who are you?
Failure.
Who are you?
Success.
Who are you? Oh, stop.
Doubt.
When it's all said and done, and they write your book, right? And they write your book and they give it to somebody else, what do you want people to say about Miss Sarah B when they read your story?
She tried. Sometimes she failed. Sometimes she succeeded. She touched a lot of hearts. She changed a lot of minds. And she was loved. And she gave a lot of love.
Ladies and
I hope they say that about me.
This is your book. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Miss Sarah B. This is the podcast, One Man, One Tree in the Hill. Thank you so much. Where can they find your work, your artwork? Do you have any of your artwork where people can find, or?
I do write a lot of poetry.
Do you have it online? Is there a website, or?
I don't really publish it because some of it is like a little controversial and people in my community don't necessarily know that I write it. But people can totally reach out on Facebook, and I'd gladly send pieces that I wrote. Should I give you my name on?
I'll put it inside the description.
Put it inside
the description.
Yeah, people feel, honestly, the main message for your listeners is thank you for listening. This has been really enlightening in a way. I'm so appreciative that you gave me this chance. And if you have any questions or conceptions about Orthodox Jews, we're so different. There's no like one of us. It's so many people, different stripes, colors, thoughts, views, philosophies, and we're very real. We have very real struggles, very real doubts. And reach out. Just get to know us. Reach out. We want to talk to you. And some don't, and that's okay. But there are many that do. So reach out. I'd love to get to know you. I'd love to answer any questions that you have.
Reach out and touch. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Jared Waters. This is my dear friend Sarah B. You're listening to the podcast One Man, One Tree, and a Hill.
Hey, you're live on the podcast One Man, One Tree, and a Hill. Say what up to the people. Now, this is when I see black excellence. It's Kenan Thompson, and I see this giant butt. I'm like, oh, who is that? Turns out that's Questlove. It's Dave Chappelle, Chris Rock, Eddie Murphy. And they're all sitting at the table, and I walk up to Eddie Murphy, and I was like, hey, Mr. Murphy, I just want to say you're the GOAT, man. You're the coldest that ever walked the face of the earth. You gotta break that thing over. She wants it private, but y'all not even together right now.
So we haven't spoken about anything but the cat for at least 2 months. And then I said, and I'm be the next Jamar Neighbors. And then she was up like, I know that's right.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for listening to the podcast. My name is Jared Waters, and I'll catch you next time. Like, subscribe, rate the podcast. Have a wonderful night, wonderful day, whatever you're listening to. I'll see you soon.